let's talk about those microaggressions, all the ways we marginalize each other. And it really doesn't matter who you are. You're going to get one of them. You missed a test, you missed the ball, you're too heavy, you're too thin, you're black, you're white, you're blue, you're green, God forbid you're queer, you're trans. We have a whole bunch of things to say. And then we also, on the flip side, have this idealism of who we think you should be. And that doesn't suit anybody, and that bar keeps moving.
Welcome to Shaping Freedom with Lisan Basquiat, the podcast where we help you unlock your potential and redefine what it means to be free. I'm your host, Lisan Basquiat. I'm a former corporate executive, a life strategist, and the founder of Shaping Freedom. With a background spanning corporate, artistic, and personal development, I bring a unique perspective to empowering others. Listen in to discover inspiring stories and practical insights that will help you reclaim your life and rewrite your narrative. My intention is for you to gain the tools and motivation to be free in your relationships, your communities, and within yourself. This, my friends, is Shaping Freedom.
On today's episode, I sit with author, speaker, mother, and someone so full of love and wisdom, Abby Kamen. Coming hot off the release of her new book, Generation We discuss trauma and its profound effects. During the conversation, I was touched by the truth that while not all trauma is equal, we can all relate to how it feels. During our conversation, Abby and I discussed how reexamining the relationship with trauma can help us to reconnect with a kinder and more forgiving version of ourselves. She also shared how her son's challenges in finding his place in the world helped her to redefine what it means to be human and to actually take the time to feel the grief that we all experience. Here is my conversation with Abby Kamen. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Abby, because the topic of generational trauma and how we process the events and thought patterns and experiences that bring us to this point is one of deep, deep interest to me. And so Ruby Warrington is actually the person who suggested that you and I have a conversation. And thank you to Ruby, first of all. And secondly, I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. First of all, obviously, I love Ruby, and I've so much enjoyed working with her. And I've gotten to know you a little bit over this past period of time when I knew I was going to be on the show, and just listening to Shaping Freedom. I listened to both sessions that you had with Kevin Powell. And like, I can just open by saying ditto, but yet from such a different lens, right? And that's what's so cool about this whole experience, is that we're all coming to the same conclusion from all our varied perspectives.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that makes it so interesting, because there are the obvious connections and conversations, and having the opportunity, having read a little bit about you ahead of time, having the opportunity to have a conversation with you, someone who maybe at first glance, may not seem like there's very much in common. I think that a lot of us are all going through the very same experiences. There are a couple of things that I did not, just full disclosure, I've not yet read your book cover to cover, but I absolutely went through it. And as I was going through, I'm like, yes. And oh my gosh, and some of these experiences that you described.
Right. And that's how I felt when I was listening to your earlier podcast. I just keep nodding my head. I'm like, exactly, said exactly the same way. Those were the same people that kind of opened my eyes, found my story. So I think that that is so interesting when we just kind of zoom in, because we all have the same generational trauma, even though it comes from these different areas, because the trauma is what keeps us actually oppressed. And what we can use, the opposite of that, is to become liberated.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit, Abby. First of all, let me ask this question. Who are you?
Who am I? Oh, that's a deep question.
That's a big question. I know.
That That is a big
Yeah.
question. It's kind of like the opening line of my book. I am who I have always been, but I have not always been me. If we're going to go to the
I
existential
love
version.
that. Yes, yes.
And actually, I mean, I think that's true. I'm going to answer that, as you said, it with some sincerity. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm a visionary. I'm a mother, a creator, a member of community, and somebody who desperately wants to feel better.
Wow. I think that, again, that is something that many of us are striving for. It's one of the things that so many of us kind of get up every day and it's like, I just want to feel better. And I want the world to help me to feel better.
And right. And we see it in so much pain. It's
Yeah.
such a painful moment for humanity. And I think we want to think that it was better in other times. And the reality is we're going to get to create those times. It hasn't happened yet. That's what the trauma pileup is all about. The trauma and all the worst of times has got us to this very monumental place that we are at, where the trauma is just in a pileup. It's seeping out through absolutely everything we do. And so how do we source hope in that trauma pileup? And I think that's what we have come yet to create. And you kind of use the same line. We are the creators of our future. We're the content creators. We get to say what it's going to look like. And so now is a great time for us to start to get together and find our commonality, get rid of the trauma within ourselves and between us and start, forging that road forward in a new way, in a way that I really don't believe has been here yet.
I agree. I think there's been a lot of, we've gone from moving toward this very individualistic society where it's like, let's just think about us. And then I think that we're starting to recognize more and more that there is the us. There's the us that's within the collective. And then there's the us that is the outgrowth of a series of events that have happened to the people that have come before us. One of the things that I did that jumped off the page at me in your book, Generation We, your book that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations. And I'm going to ask you
Thank
to
you.
dive into and share with us this book, what it's about and what it is that you're looking to convey through it in a moment. But there's this one line that came out, generation after generation. We face the same traumas because we have yet to heal them. And I would love to, if you don't mind, let's start there.
Absolutely. And it means that we have, until this moment in time, should we choose to create another path, we have been controlled by survivalism, which is power and greed and safety, right?
That's right.
And we have hijacked belonging to fit within those constraints. And if we're going to go there, we have to call out the patriarchy, which I have renamed the paintriarchy, because I also love your point of view. This is not just about one gender. And I was listening to you saying this is a conversation for all genders. There
Absolutely.
are other moments in time where we can say we're talking about men's issues or women's issues or queer issues or whatever we want to do. But in this moment of collective healing, it is that exact word. It is the collective. And what do we do to each other in this whole panoramic view of our lives? Who are we to each other? And I do believe that starts at the familial grid level. And the familial grid is just a reflection of the world, and the world is the reflection of the grid. And so we are in constant trauma with each other because we can't get in right relationship with ourselves or the world because of the patriarchy. And the patriarchy has given us all the binaries. And it started with religion and it has branched out since then. That doesn't mean that religion is necessarily bad. It means that what it grew into be, less spiritual practice, more rules and regulations, then it became a tool for the patriarchy to use for now this hierarchical system that has been our reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. That's a lot.
Not
That's
light
a lot.
stuff.
Not light stuff at all. It's a lot. And it's what we're living through every day. And I agree with you. It is incredibly painful and repressive in a world that claims to be doing the opposite. And I think that there's so much going on that really is about rules and regulations and how we're supposed to show up. But we're not talking about trauma. We're talking about it in a very kind of social media way, but what is it? Let's talk about what it is.
I I really want to go there. And again, as I was listening to you, you said something that I call the paper cuts, because my version of trauma is the paper cuts.
That's right.
Nothing bad happened to me. If anything, I got the American dream. What is there to complain about? Life happened. It was, well, of course, like everybody else, people were immigrants. They came here. They did their best. There was complication in understanding who I was in society. So I have a unique perspective, as folks who don't know, but hopefully will know by the end of reading my book. I'm a white, Jewish, cisgendered female who did have a heterosexual marriage and has 2 children. As a result of that, I am a daughter, and then I'm a member of my extended family. And when I went through all of what those labels meant to me, I saw some offered me privilege and some offered me oppression. And so then as I diced through those, I was like, well, how does that make me feel on a daily basis? Why do I still feel so shitty? What are the things that are making me not feel great? What are the things that are hurting my children, hurting us in this society? And that was the paper cuts, the microaggressions that are our microplastics that we live with every day, let alone the real trauma that then severs a limb, or you have trauma that is just, earthly trauma. You get tragic illness or hurt by a car or whatever. But let's talk about those microaggressions, all the ways we marginalize each other. And it really doesn't matter who you are. You're going to get one of them. You missed a test. You missed the ball. You're too heavy. You're too thin. You're black. You're white. You're blue. You're green. God forbid you're queer. You're trans. We have a whole bunch of things to say. And then we also, on the flip side, have this idealism of who we think you should be. And that doesn't suit anybody. And that bar keeps moving. So it doesn't actually honor who we really are. And that's what we don't spend time about investigating. Is you opened with asking me, who are you? That would be a great thing for us to find out, because it's our authentic selves that we need to connect with.
Absolutely. I read also another line that I thought was brilliant. And there was this paragraph that talked about what happened when your grandfather passed away and how your mom gave herself 24 hours to grieve. And then immediately,
Wow.
and that was the thing that leapt that paragraph for me. It was like 24 hours to grieve, and then very quickly stepped into figuring out how the family was going to move forward, because she was the other partner in this business that your grandfather and she worked on and built together. And how she then stepped right into taking care of not just herself, but the entire family, it seemed, or I guess a lot of your family through that. And
100%.
and the fact that she was 23 years old. And so I read that, and there were so many things in that that I thought were really interesting. One was 24 hours to grieve the loss of your father. I absolutely myself, having lost my father and mother and brother, feel that when there's responsibility and things that have to happen with that person's loss. So I'd love to hear, like, when you talk about why is the topic of intergenerational trauma one that is so important and near and dear to your heart? I'd love to know that. And I'd also love to know how you kind of some of the things that you've experienced on your own journey through your own experiences.
Oh, you hit right at where the trauma started. And that was right at the beginning. Who could do that? And who would give themselves 24 hours to grieve? But on the other hand, life was moving fast. She was a young woman in a very man's world. She had to figure it out. My grandmother had relied on her since she was a child. My uncle was in college, and she is that type of person. I mean, she was a mover and a shaker. She was a badass. And she's just like, I've got this. And that line she would repeat to us very many times in our growing up. Look, I'll hold you, whatever. But if I had 24 hours to grieve, you're going to have less. If nobody died, we're going to move on. So it was, again, don't cry, pull it together, up by your bootstraps, let's go onward. It wasn't that she wasn't kind or tender ever, because that's not true. She was plenty kind and plenty tender. But she also, from that trauma, she could go to 0 and 100 in a nanosecond. Her response time was so fast, and there wasn't a lot of time to digest what happened. And here you get this person, and she viewed the world through a very analytical lens. That was the lens that was given to her, and she didn't have time to explore often the softer parts of her. And then she gets this child who is all about intuition and imagination and all of the kind of opposites. And she loved that about me. And when she had time to go there with me, it went really, really well. And when she didn't, it was like onward. And she saw in me all these possibilities of who I could be beyond who she was. And because I had this level of intuition, whatever she didn't have in her life or whatever was a struggle, she wanted so much more for me. And actually that became a real huge trauma point for us because we had perfectionism between us. And like my mom, as like another line I put, my mom I wanted an A grade and she just wanted to win. And so we would just kind of go there a lot. And so she was so part of that. And in reviewing my relationship with her and being so mad at it and so grateful for it and all the feels about it, on one hand, it was all this privilege. And then on the other hand, I felt so oppressed. I had to look inward from that as to why did I feel that way? What was I going to do about it? And then evaluate what had I passed on in those same thought patterns to my children, though I was a softer parent. And that really becomes the vehicle for the book is first I look at myself and my mother, and then I come to see myself and my children. And I see that all of those binaries that were part and parcel to the patriarchy are now in me. And I have to eradicate them for us to heal our generational trauma. And I also realized in that, that one of the most confusing things that I would cite as the center to all of that is actually unconditional love. We throw that term around as if it's the term that's going to save us, but I invite us to look deeper into what does unconditional love mean, because that was a real barrier between my mom and I. It became like blind faith and devotion. So because we loved each other so passionately and what she would always use as unconditionally, then that meant she could act however she wanted. And I would just assume that it was okay. And, whether even she gave me grace to act however I wanted and it was okay, it wasn't actually okay. There are very many healthy boundaries and conditions to a really good, loving relationship, which I call untethered love, where we are able to take the expectations and judgments out of that love equation and invite in our authentic selves, who we really are, and hear each other when we say, hey, that hurts me. And rather than getting defensive, say, well, let me be curious about that. Why? So I started to realize that that was something I wanted to work harder on. And so then I looked at my children and invited them to have a not unconditional love relationship with me, an untethered relationship with me, which meant we had to explore some of the times that it had been unconditionally painful.
On the inside, I'm saying, yes, yes, yes. I was primarily raised by my father. And there are aspects of having been the daughter of a single parent who was a man that I really loved. And one of those things is that I always believed and knew that I could take care of myself and my family if I was ever in a position where I needed to. And I really loved that. I also loved at the time the fact that I felt like I didn't need to wallow in a lot of emotion, which at the time
seemed great, right? That was Roberta.
Great.
She was like, this is great. I got this going. I'm not dealing with the emotion. Everybody stand in line.
Exactly. And then it was great until it was not. And one of the things that I also share with you is that while I had this parent who was a go-getter and he made things happen and he did many, many, many wonderful things in his lifetime. I mean, being an immigrant from Haiti and coming to this country and raising 3 children, we 3 were first generation. Not an easy thing to do when you come from a non-English speaking country. Here, you're learning the language, you're learning the culture and all of that good stuff. And you're walking into a racism that is very unlike what is experienced other places. So there's a lot there. And there was also for me this feeling of that I had to be perfect and that I had to get everything right, and failure was never an option, and being overcome by emotion or feeling. And it was very similar in that it really was about, a lot of it was about, it got translated for me into ensuring that I wasn't making him unhappy. or finding ways to do the things in the way that he set out for me and us to do. And it wasn't until later when I had my own children and when I started to process my own life, as so many of us do when we become parents, that I started to look at, okay, I know what happened for me. What do I want for my children? And I too adopted this, like what you refer to as untethered love, where it's like, okay, who are you really? Who am I really? And let's talk from there. And you can share how you feel. Not easy to do. So much easier said than done. When the teenager is saying things to you about you that you don't really want to hear at the time, but it has really helped to heal.
What I was going to say is, and it wasn't even so much what they said to me about me. It's what that I had to learn about them. My son is queer and my daughter has some neurodivergency, very like some ADHD, which I think is so common now in young women getting diagnosed in their 20s, which was her story, which did explain a lot of her childhood. But it was really my son's queer story that helped me really expand on who are we as humans? Like, let's take the gender side out of it. Let's take all of the orientation stuff out of it. Who are you? And I really deep dive in that. And he's a very inquisitive human to begin with. And he's sort of, if we're going to go into the social justice realm, he and I have always been there together. We work together in that realm for a while. And I write about that in a bit of the book, what was good about that, what didn't go so well about that. But he just constantly challenged me to explore my beliefs. And from that, he really asked me to explore my beliefs on what does it mean to be human. And that was really so helpful. And he really did it along all lines, like race, gender, religion. We also, though you cite us coming here as Black and Haitian, so we're Jewish. This is not an easy thing. And in these times right now, understand how complicated that is. Though we may look like in this generation, and certainly from my parents' generation to our generation, some things have gone really well. There's certainly some successful things that did happen for many of us, which I would hope that could happen to all peoples of all ways. But now we're seeing where it's really causing so much pain in the world. And there's a whole nother chapter to go there. But as I was raised, what I will say is I was raised with the trauma of the Holocaust and that I could never let this happen again. And because this has happened, these were the things that I had to do to be successful as a human. A very insular world. I was raised in a community that was predominantly Jewish because other people didn't want to be around us. So it's just a different type of racism. Like, I didn't know I was white until recently. Like, that just never even was something that I would have considered other than a box I checked because that's what they said you're supposed to do. But the concept of whiteness, I didn't own. And it really was my son who, during Black Lives Matter and COVID and all of the stuff going on with my mom and his own queer story and whatnot, brought to my attention of how much my whiteness had been a privilege for me that I didn't know, and how much my understanding of what it means, anti-Semitism, I had to move beyond and have continued to move beyond what I thought something was to what it really is, so much bigger than just myself.
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
I commend you for taking the time and investing the energy into learning your son and his perspective of his life and what it feels like for him to be him and for you to be you in this world that's just moving so quickly. And I also applaud you for parsing away and peeling back the onion for all these different ways that we seem to be so very different, whether it's our orientation or where we come from or any of these religion, like all of these different things. When you unpeel them, what we come to find is that we are all here really striving for for the same thing, which is to be happy, to not
And
feel
to be safe
pain
and to
and to
belong.
be,
Right.
yes. Yeah. So even I know when I was younger, I grew up in the 60s and 70s as well, and the 80s. And I remember so much talk about like when we were younger, it was like this, or, people back in the day used to do that. And I think, as I've matured, how much separation is created in that whole, segregation amongst generations. Like, I think it's nonsense because at the end of the
It's
day,
ridiculous.
if I can't look at a 20-year-old woman or a 25-year-old young man and see the parts of him or her that are within me and vice versa, then what am I doing? How can I complain about any prejudice? How can I complain about any difference in the ways that people are treated? And I know you tackle that issue as well. So maybe would you share something about your perspective on this generation gap?
Which I say is non-existent. Our generations are merely mile markers for the experiences that are happening in the world at the time in which we are born. But we are always human and we are evolving. And I also believe, get a little metaphysical on this. I do believe our soul has its own trajectory and that it has a series of called lifetimes, whatever, that it is gaining in understanding. I sensed you might, so I feel sort of comfortable going here. But I really do believe that. And I believe that so our evolutionary age and our chronological age are not in concert with one another. I am not wiser because I am older, although in this moment in time, I might be garnering some extra wisdom because I'm really working on it so that I can share it and learn from other people who are coming in who are infinitely younger than me, who are also teaching. So then you become, and I write about this in my book, I challenge our parenting system. First of all, we parent each other all the time. You don't have to have children to parent, nor do you have to be a child. All of us are child of somebody, right? So we're already there. But you don't have to procreate to create, and you don't have to procreate to parent. Parenting is how we communicate with one another. It's our baseline for teaching each other how to do absolutely everything. And how we have parented is a very didactic thing. Kind of what you were saying before. This is what it is. This is how you do it. Let's carry on. But what if we're interactive? And if we ask all those questions well, this is how I learned to do it. How would you do it? How can we do it together? Where can we improve on it? Or was it better when we did it the other way? And then you bring in success and failure and you take away the perfectionism. You just want to be and you just want to do and you want to create and you want to stay curious. And if we can keep those things more at the forefront than the mile markers of victory and perfectionism and idealism, we're going to learn so much more about ourselves and each other. And we're also going to be able to tap into our creative juices, which are they're brimming, they're waiting to rip through us. But we hold back because then we're just dealing with all this trauma between us. Who has time to create when all you can deal with is the trauma and the pains of just being human?
When in fact, you actually are creating, whether you're aware of it or not. So
Exactly.
So if more of us can become a little more conscious of that and of the power that we have in co-creation, I think that it will allow that time that so many of us claim to not have. Right? If you understand that we're creating, yeah.
About time, right? We don't have time to feel joy. We don't have time to feel pain. We don't have time to feel. And that is kind of my tagline is feel calm better. I invite everybody through my art and my words to join me in a deep dive onto how do we feel? I take specific feelings and I'm like, dive in with me. What does this mean to you? And it's going to change. But if we can keep it up in the air between us and really investigate our feelings, we're going to learn more about ourselves and each other. And we have to slow down and we have to take that time to feel, because where we keep rushing on cruise control, that's how the world has always gone. There's always something you got to harvest. you got to do this, you got to do that. Like we always have things of why we don't have time to be human. And therefore we're not acting very humane, right? Because we
Right.
don't have time to tap into that. But if we could spend more time learning how to be human, maybe we could learn how to be more humane because we would be kinder to ourselves and maybe hopefully kinder to each other.
Absolutely. I think it's also because it's seen as messy, when in fact, what's happening right now is a bit of a mess. It's actually, a bit of it's a cluster F if you really want to
It's
know
a
my opinion on
F.
it.
Yes.
And I'll just, it just is. And so, these things that we claim to not have the time and energy for, the reality of life is that they hit you anyway. So one of the things that I recognized was that I worked in corporate at the time of the death of my brother and also of my mom. And they give you, they being, most companies, as part of your benefits package, they give you like a certain amount of time for bereavement when you pass away. And so I took that time. I almost allotted my grieving to the amount of time that I was given. And
You have
then
this many days and it's over.
and I did it. Very similar
Right.
to your mom being like,
It's-
I'm an entrepreneur. I got 24 hours and I got to get back on it and figure this out because there's a pace, And so one of the things that I was interesting is that when my brother passed away, my window was very short because there was so much going on. And then when my
so
mom,
painful too.
so painful.
I mean, it was such a big story.
Just hugely
he was
painful.
A big story.
But just at the familial level, just within the family, it was so painful. And then my mom passed away, and it was in the middle of, or right before I experienced and filed for divorce. And so I had all these things going on. And then my dad passed away. And again, because this is how life is, there were so many things going on. But I will tell you this, Abby, I could not. I tried to do the same thing that I did with the other two, and it just was no longer possible for me because I had done so much of the work of tapping in that I couldn't snap back into that, headspace of like, I'm just going to march through it. I had to sit in it, and it was very, very painful. And it took quite a long time, but it was also a marker for me for how much work I had done. And so the point I'm making is that while things are messy and while we sometimes are taught and programmed to just blow through it, because if you're a badass, that means that you are a badass and you don't respond to things that happen, it's supposed to be messy. And sometimes it's the mess that takes you to the other side.
And we have to go there. And as I'm listening to this story and feeling all of that, the work that you needed to do to then even be able to release the grief that you felt. And you're talking just about the real grief in losing people. And what I want to add to that is this belief grief that we're all going through. We thought it was going to look a different way. And now we have to grieve that it doesn't actually look that way. So all of this programming and all of this stuff that was, so we have to take time to grieve. We are not going to be able to steamroller over our feelings and our thoughts. We're going to have to explore them, whether it is through the loss of another human that could then prompt some things about how you're feeling and believing things, or if it's just a realization that what we thought or what we were taught. I mean, how much are we learning right now that everything that we taught we could throw out because it's been a lie. It's been a lot of propaganda.
Yeah.
It's really hard to know that. And I want to kind of boil that down to something that was so hard for me to admit to myself, because I feel like we all think we're so much more evolved than we are. And to be human and to say, well, maybe I'm just not as evolved as I thought I was, really came down to understanding my son and his sexuality. And I'm going to use that as just another one of the many mile markers that we have. It also raised, there's so many things. We have to know that we have biases. And we are going to have to grieve them. Even if we don't in our heart want to have them, they are there. And for us to be able to grieve our physicality as in losing a human, or grieve our physicality of a human in learning how to love more broadly, more radically, all of our humanness, not just some of our humanness, those are going to have to go hand in hand right now. And it is going to take time.
Absolutely.
You just can't steamroll through this. One of the things that we have right now, which I think COVID was here to help that, right? A global pause. And for some of it, it was just devastating. And that side, we will never get back. But for some of the pause that it offered us, that kind of reset like our rhythm a little bit.
That's right.
And we got, working remotely and just maybe seeing we want to be with family differently. We want to learn, when we're in closer proximity to each other, we also learn more about each other. So there's just lots that onion that we're just peeling through. But time is one of the most precious things that I want us to realize. It's on our side.
Yes.
We don't have to think of it as scarce. It's not a scarcity. It's here.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to take ownership of it. We have
Right.
to, I don't even know if it's reclaiming. We have to claim it. And if we want to do all of this evolutionary work, we have to make time to feel all the feels that it feels to learn that about ourselves and each other.
Right. And then there's also just the grieving about what's happening in the world that we're all doing, that I think sometimes, how can you, if you're on social media or if you're reading or watching the news, or if you're, I don't know, walking down the street, how can you not, even on an unconscious level, be grieving, the person who's sitting on the street and asking for money, or, you walk down any New York City street, there's so much to grieve about, or even the politics and the ways that our politics are playing out, or the ways that there's so much, even you and I, there's so much that's alike about you and I. And there's also so much that could be in the space of grief between you and I before we even get to Abby and Lisanne having a conversation, and I think that if it's almost like the world attempts to program us to be robots. And the truth of the matter is that we're not, and we can't. And we can't keep going back to the same ways of doing things and of solving problems.
Yes.
I have to try.
Oh my God, you should see me here cheering on you, because I'm like,
true.
What she said.
It's true.
Yes. And I mean, you used the word, you went right in it. And as we approach this ridiculousness of the AI, look, there's going to be things like everything. Some of it's going to be amazing and great and going to help us. And some of it we should be terribly concerned about. But also just what you said, like I'm over here, like literally rock starring you. That comment about we are not robots. Like I want everybody just hear that statement and remind yourself that to be a human, you cannot be a robot. And I kind of explore that when I explore her story, because she has some minor health issues and like her body just doesn't function on robotic plan. And now we have just learned to parcel out time for it. And I learned so much about that concept through her. And we just have to slow down. And for companies to start to make allowances for, like, there's no sick time. Just take what you need. We're all going to get there anyway. Work at your own pace. All of these things will honor us being able to see our humanity in broader perspective and see each other's. Because when we don't have time, and I'm really witnessing this in my life, I don't know if you are, most people in my world right now have got blinders on. They are refusing to feel anything. They're like, this is what we were taught. This is what we know. This is what we're going to do. And when I'm in social situations, I'm clutching my little crystal beads here. I'm like, I don't know how you're functioning and not feeling.
I'm going to challenge the not feeling thing. I think people do feel. I think it's whether or not you're willing to allow room and space for the feeling. I think people are feeling, and It's like, how can I shove it down? Because there's always this glimmer. I was a keynote speaker for a group called Genesee in Los Angeles, and they work on.
I saw that. That looked very cool.
It was amazing. And I got to speak to a beautiful group of middle school and high school aged students. And the mission for this organization is to prevent domestic violence. And part of the conversation that we had in that room, which was so beautiful, the energy in that room was amazing, was really this conversation about feelings and how you feel and how you have the right to feel what you feel and to explore that and to set boundaries and to really take a conscious look at how you're living. And I think that that's really what you're talking about, Abby, which is we're here and we have this set of circumstances, whatever those circumstances are. And mine may be similar or different than yours, but we're still dealing with something. And how do
but the
you...
feelings are the same.
The feelings are the same. The emotions are the same.
The feelings are the same. Regardless
absolutely.
of the situation,
Absolutely.
we only have, there's feelings. The feelings are the same.
Right.
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
And I want to jump in on something that you said there, and I want to tie it back into grief. When we shove down our feelings, they sort of have the different stages of grief. The first one's anger, right?
That's right.
And we're just at the anger level. And I'm watching an enormous portion of my community just be angry. They don't want to explore what
sliding
other
back
things.
And forth. It's like anger or less anger or hot anger. But before it gets to sadness, you better bring it back to anger because
100%.
Sadness you don't want. Anger is good. And it really is. I'm from New York,
and anger,
where it's like anger.
Right? Anger. And anger is going to, as if it's going to accomplish something, as if that's the way we're going to get it done. And that goes back to victory, because victory goes back to war. And that goes back to what we've been taught. So if we can stay in that. And so it all kind of ties back to the same thing. And so unless we are going to give ourselves time to feel and time to be curious about those feelings and time to be curious about the information regarding those feelings, like, what is the truth here? Maybe I don't know everything. Maybe there's something to learn more about, or maybe it's not just this one thing. Maybe it can be more than one thing at the same time, getting through the binaries. Because if we're going to just stay in black and white, who's to say what's even black and white anymore? I think we're all starting to realize we might not have such a great handle on the color wheel here. Maybe we should invite more of it in.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something about we're living in this dichotomy of anger and worry, right? But neither one of those are enough to actually fuel getting anywhere. It fuels more venting and more spewing. And it really becomes like a tennis match where I'm throwing it on you and you're throwing it back at me, but we're really not getting anywhere. And I think that one of the things that I am personally frustrated with is this idea of this war mentality that is happening at the very macro level when we start off at the micro level telling children, nonviolence, tell somebody, talk it out. These are your brothers and sisters. And it's like we teach these things like parenting in the ways that some of us are trying to parent differently, where it's about curiosity and questioning and having authentic relationships versus authoritative ones. I believe that if we can create more of this culture within our families, it 100%. Will eventually bubble out into the rest of the world. But we have to allow this runoff and spill off to happen, I guess,
Well, let's stick there though, because I do think that you bring up a really huge point. Like, childhood doesn't have to suck. But you want to know what? With all those lovely words you said, childhood sucks. Like, that playground is so friggin' brutal. I mean, name the person who hasn't experienced the eye roll, the bigotry, the oppression on the playground. I don't think
Yeah.
any of us could claim to be, and usually it's the bully they were oppressed and now they're going to oppress you.
Always.
And we
Yeah.
sort of start off with that. But if we in our families can offer a more compassionate, really like we're on this road together from the minute we meet each other, whatever that is, safe. And safety is, I was just talking to my kids about this the other day, and it was somewhat of like, we're a loving family, all good things, whatever. And yet the truth was we weren't always safe with each other. And that's just going to have to be a fact that we're going to need to know. Not physically, obviously, we were very physically safe, but there were concerns and things that came up, ideals that people had, this perfectionism. And there's not safety in perfectionism. There's not safety in idealism. There's not safety in, non-expansive thoughts on, gender and misogyny and all of those other things, the isms. And learning, but you got to accept yourself for who you are. And then you got to realize if that's the truth. I think, you guys were talking about all the isms. We got all the isms, racism, homophobia, all of that. You put it all in a package, and now we all have to navigate the intersectionality of all of that. And I don't think many people are really ready to go there. It takes a lot to go there. So I love all the humans that think they're all so evolved. Well, if you're so evolved, why are we still talking about Black Lives Matter? Why are women still so oppressed? And why don't I have control over my body parts? Like, apparently we haven't gotten there yet.
Not quite.
What keeps happening in the world is a very few, and I will call it the patriarchal of the patriarchal. They are running this ship because of money and power and greed. And they have their foot on all of our necks. And at some point we have to say, we're not going to take it anymore. And I liked what you also said. Now we need a plan. What exactly is that plan? It's great to bitch about what it's not. What is it? And how are we going to get it? And I hope that through all of our creativity and through these conversations and pushing the needle forward, we'll start to imagine, if we want this world to look different, what does that look like, and how we can start to forge steps to getting there.
I love what you're saying, Abby, this idea. I think that we as humans are really quick to speak about what we don't want. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't want this. I don't want that. Ask someone what they want. And there's that, deer in the headlights that I get a lot, when asking.
Right?
And I get it from myself sometimes. And when I find myself kind of kvetching about things, I'm like, I don't want this. And then I'm like, okay, Lisan, that's great. What do you want? And I'm like, oh, well, let me get a cup of tea. Let me get a cup of tea and sit down and think about it. But that is time well spent is the point here, right? It's time well spent. It's those things that create a pause in your day. And quite often we are trained and programmed to run away from those things because they take us away, it appears, from our goals. But it's those things that require a little bit of time, like consciously thinking about how you're parenting or how you're showing up as the child in a situation, consciously thinking about what you want versus what you don't want, consciously considering your biases. Like, what do I think about you? Why do I think that? And where are the commonalities that we can perhaps build up, and what can we do to erase some of our ideas about each other? Those things take time.
They take time. And I want to, while we're going there, it's a great way to kind of think about it. Dear everyone, you're going to have to choose your people.
That's right.
There's nobody's given to you.
That's right.
I don't care what your story is, how you got together, whether you were birthed together or whatnot. Now you have to choose each other.
That's right.
You have to radically choose each other. And with that, I hope you get to create some infinite energy between you, which means that it is really a safe space to grow together, knowing that nobody's going to be perfect on this journey, but the safety to say, hey, this didn't go well, or this is going really well. Let's do more of this. Let's bring more people into this from both sides. But it's that choosing of each other, which I write about in my book, is during this time of COVID and during this time of our familial awakening, I radically chose my children, and I asked them to choose me too.
Yeah.
And there were other players, certainly, but the place that I started with was them, because I thought we were already open to it. But I realized that I had to tell them I chose them and that I wanted to learn and grow with them.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to choose me and see all of me and know that I had so much work to still do on myself. And I wanted to be safe in my discovery of myself with them, and for them to likewise be safe in their discovery journey as well. And when we can start bridging that out and including more people into that safety discovery net, and I see us doing it. I see plenty of spaces where we are doing it, and we're considerate with each other. And we try to, even with our language in some groups, saying, does this resonate with everybody? Everybody's still on page, everybody okay? But that is not all spaces. There are plenty of other spaces that I'm in. At the minute I even go there, it's this people start saying, oh, now she's coming in with her kumbaya and all that bullshit. And it's just such a derogatory dismissal. And I'm like, well, then you're not ready to go here.
Exactly. Let's talk about the kumbaya. One of the things you talk about is, which I love, is energy. And it's so funny, right? So good, because people, as soon as you start saying things like energy or esoteric,
I've
folks
lost
are
them.
like,
The eyes roll back.
right? But let's really talk about what energy is, right? Like, yes, there's the esoteric energy. And I certainly believe that we live many lifetimes. And this right here is this lifetime, this planet, this time. Lisan Basquiat, what you got? What are you doing? Right. And there's that. And then there's energy. And I think you talk about infinite energy and how, what it really means. And I'd love for you to share with the audience some clarity on energy. Like, what is it really?
And I really got to deep dive on this. It started with just a fascination with the concept of the word energy. And of course, Albert Einstein comes up, and I find that he says energy is everything. I start to really play with that. And I was already starting to experience some energetic shift in myself that I could see was notably happening, that I had some gift with working with energy, that it could take me to places and spaces and feelings. I'm like, wow, that is really cool. So, okay, so I've got a concept of energy. Now what does it mean? And I realized that energy was the relationships that I was having with everybody. And I'm like, I never thought of my relationships in terms of energy. And I realized that when I was in toxic spaces, when I felt not seen, when fear was really the only experience I was having, whether I was giving it or receiving it, that was a toxic energy exchange between me and another person, or me and a situation. And that vulnerability and trust were just not welcomed into that situation. I felt like I was in a cage. I was like, that's interesting that I feel that way. And then I realized, well, what do I feel like when I'm kind of just like humming along? I started to identify that as being limited energy. And I realized, well, why does it just feel like it's just cruising along so easily? Well, I'm like, well, because I'm in the status quo. I'm not challenging anything. Everything feels like, okay, this is the rules. This is how you play with them. This is what's going on. I really wasn't challenging my vulnerability. I really wasn't dealing with anything that was fearful. I was just cruising right in that status quo realm. And then I realized when I wanted to really challenge things and really go in on my fear and vulnerability and invite them in safely and with a place that was trusted, that then I was talking about infinite energy. And I realized when I got to infinite energy that I was safe enough to succeed or fail, because those both can be scary things to have happen to you, in a place that was really welcoming, and that neither really was better than the other. It was just like, okay, that's what I'm feeling. Let's explore it. There was a lot of curiosity in that space. And that space just really felt belonging and safety. And I did start to notice that mostly with my children, as we started to have zillions of conversations. Like, another thing I want to invite into energy in this exploration, for me, I'm like Socrates. I like to talk things out. All of these podcasts, all of these ways that we keep talking to each other, that's a great way to explore it. It might not be everybody's way. And then there's music and art and all sorts of other ways that we can explore this. So there's not one way, but in the spaces that you feel safe, that invite you into your vulnerability and into your trust and into your fear, are what I would call the chosen spaces and the infinite spaces, where we're exchanging energy in a very free way.
And that is energy. That really is,
Right.
When people are doing
It's
energy work, it's to help you to be in a healthier, energetic space. And energy is
right, which
something
can
that you can
also,
release and get rid of, the
yes,
right. So how do you,
but
let's imagine that you're speaking to someone for whom the concept of energy is just foreign, right? So how do you start to become more attuned to the energy that you're both putting out and the energetic spaces that you're in?
Greatest word ever created, curiosity. You have to enter the space with curiosity. I've been really thinking about this a lot. When people refuse to be curious, then honestly, we're going to not be able to get to infinite energy. We might not even get past toxic energy. That's just where we're going to be. And that's okay.
I admire and appreciate the work that you're doing so much, Abby. I really appreciate your humanity. I love the fact that you have started both of your books, both Generation We and which I thought was such a cute name, Flash Mom.
Oh my goodness, that was where it all started.
Your personal guide to the universe. I'm like, I'm going back to read that one. And what I love is,
it was less evolved than my current work.
Listen, it's where you were. It's where you were, right? And so what I really appreciate about you as a creator and as an author and an artist is the fact that you start in a moment in time. You know, and I think that you talk about moments and you talk about the moments between the moments. And I think that if more of us who are parents, who are women, who are, you know, of the age, you know, whatever the ages are that we are, I think if more human beings were to really take the time and the moment to check the energetic health of what's happening in between time, in those moments between one thing to another, I think that it will really help us to start to diffuse and deconstruct some of these very toxic ways of being that we are numbed to actually live within.
A good word.
You know,
we really are numb to it. We have to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I commend you for the ways that you're showing up and the journeys you're willing to go on for the sake of your family and for the sake of all of us as a collective. Thank you so much for showing up there and for spending a little bit of time with me here. I really, really appreciate it. And
before we sign off, can I thank you too? Because the work that you're doing and the work that your family has offered the collective is just incredible.
Thank you.
With Shaping Freedom, the expansiveness that you are bringing here to people is, you should just know it. You're moving a lot of needles. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the conversation about family, I think we talk a lot here about what's happening in the world and what they're all doing. And I really, truly, deeply believe, and one of the reasons that I was so excited to spend time with you was because I know you share this belief that if we can start within our families, we have a chance of things, of the needle moving, quite frankly. And it's so important to me. And it's like, yeah, it's those things that are happening out there, but let's start talking about what's happening right in here where we have 100%, you know.
We've got it. We got an opportunity to do something.
Absolutely.
When each of us start going there.
And if we do it
what's
here,
happening out there, then out there, it stands a chance of getting better.
Exactly. So Abby, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'd love to continue talking, and congratulations on the publication of Generation We. I look forward to maybe chatting about it a little bit more later on once more people have had an opportunity to read it. This is an incredible read and spoken directly out of your mouth. It's so beautiful. It's so authentic and such a powerful message. So congratulations and thank you so much. We've got a lot of amazing things to take away from this episode, but above all else, it is imperative that we give ourselves the time to acknowledge and feel into moments as they happen, and to not just shove them to the back of our mind. I have to thank our guest, Abby Kamen, for her generous and vulnerable share. Please go pick up Abby Kamen's new book, Generation We. I sincerely thank you for tuning in to Shaping Freedom.